So from flying, we come down to the sea for a talk about cruising to somewhere, preparing for calmer seas. Please welcome Angie Stephen, Vice President, Asia Pacific, Royal Caribbean. Angie. Thank you for joining us. Your first WiT. And so first question, a happy question. What's been the silver lining of the pandemic for you?
Well, here in Singapore, the silver lining is that we were all held hostage on the island, and the only way you could use your passport was to go on a Royal Caribbean cruise. So it has opened us up to hundreds of thousands of new cruisers that would absolutely not dare step foot on a cruise because it was for old people and not for them. So it's really opened us up to a new audience.
Right.
Great silver lining.
Yeah, and you said it's also forced you to embrace technology, right? I mean, you were doing it before, but it's really accelerated this.
Yeah, exactly. So we were always working with technology at the foundation of our innovation, but a great example is even our app. So we had to fast track a lot of the technology plans that we had for our app to help streamline the guest experience to cruising in this new environment.
All right. So you talk about the new customers. How many people have you handled since? And they seem to be skewing younger as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've always been great for multi-gen families. We've introduced cruising to over 150,000 people in Singapore. About 2/3 are new to cruising. And we also found that it was a lot of millennials that were checking us out. You know, our ships make great places for Instagrammable moments. And again, they want to use their passports. Young people love to travel. And so this was the best thing that they could get their hands on in the last 12 months.
Yeah, it's interesting in the investors panel yesterday, they talked about two trends, which was hyper-localized experiences and Gen Z, right? You know, the Gen Z, which seems to be getting into cruise. So will they return though? You know, once people can travel again and fly again to far-flung places?
You know, I think a good portion will because they understand the value and convenience of cruising, especially if they're traveling as a group. But we're doing that research now because that's a great question for us. We cruise all over the world, not just Singapore. So if you cruised with us in Singapore, you have choice now. When you go to Europe, are you going to jump on that cruise ship in Barcelona to go visit France and Italy? Or, you know, as we learned yesterday, people may not want to go to so many destinations because it's a hassle in this current environment. So I think cruise will bode well because you only have to fly to Spain, but yet we're going to take you to France and Italy. So I think there's a great opportunity for us to secure those guests beyond the Singapore cruises to nowhere.
That's true. You just stay on a cruise and then you take care of all the paperwork so we don't have to have all the hassle.
Hassle-free.
Okay.
I still have not gotten you on a cruise ship, though.
All right, let's talk about how your distribution has changed during this period. This is interesting, right? Because you went hyper-local. How has your distribution changed?
Well, interesting, especially in Southeast Asia, there was never really an online distributor selling cruises. We worked with very traditional travel partners. And the reason why is because Royal Caribbean is an experience and we don't want to focus on price and we want price parity in the marketplace. So what the pandemic has opened up is the evolution of online retailer selling cruise. And so we've partnered up with, not new to e-commerce, but new to cruise with like Klook and Trip.com and KKday. So that's been interesting, as well as trying to help the traditional partners get into that social digital space.
Right. So did you have to educate these online platforms because they're not used to selling cruises either, right? So did you have to educate them, or how did you have to integrate into their systems for them to sell your cruises?
Well, in the beginning, it was a bit of a manual process as a proof of concept before plugging into the API experience. And so there was a lot of working together to understand what is the value proposition, because a lot of online retailers usually need a price advantage or distressed inventory, and that's not the brand experience that we're wanting to demonstrate. So we've worked together, and using Klook as the example, they did plug into our API, and they literally went from 0 to being in our top 5 distribution in Singapore. So it's a great testament that consumers today want to shop online.
Right. So how do you feel then the online distribution platforms need to rethink how they sell? Because you talk about how they actually just price or distress inventory. How do they need to rethink how they sell if they want to get into cruises?
Well, I think, and we learned, I think we heard some of this from the startups, is how do you use AR and video to create the experience before you actually board the experience. I think that's very interesting and something I would love to work with the online partners to explore and how we can do that in a more robust way, as well as with our traditional retailers, because they are already doing that so well offline.
Right. Okay. So this has just given you access to new customers, right? Because this online gives you new a base of customers. Have you looked at also e-commerce platforms like Lazada and Shopee? Because we have also seen during this period, Singapore suppliers working with e-commerce platforms.
Yes, absolutely. So we are in talks with how do we get our product out to a wider audience, and Lazada and Shopee are perfect examples of where people are shopping. That's where we need to be. We need to digitally and socially be where the consumer is shopping.
Right. So I know that the traditional travel agents is a core part of your business, right? So how are you bringing them along to make sure that they, get on with this new wave?
It's through education and trialing and learning and being open to restructuring the way that they hire their staffing and what they focus on their marketing efforts. And so it's intimidating at first, but everyone knows it's the place to go to. It's just figuring out how to get there. And so, we have API connections, but I think the traditional travel partner can use support in how to merchandise on their online site. And I think if there's providers in the audience that can do that, that's a good opportunity for you to explore.
Right. So have your direct bookings also increased during this period, though, because you were marketing kind of simple, cruise to nowhere experiences, right? So did your direct bookings increase?
So naturally, our direct business did pick up because we were in business, and a lot of our travel partners were just rebuilding and hiring back staff. So in the beginning, yes. What I'll say, what has grown is digital bookings, whether that is direct or with travel partners who are digitally selling cruises. They've been able to recover business and grow their cruise business faster than others who have not yet gotten into that game successfully.
Okay, so you've also resumed cruising in Hong Kong and other markets, right? So what percentage capacity are you now?
Yeah, so Hong Kong just started last week doing cruises to nowhere. An interesting fact is that Singapore was the first ship in the Royal Caribbean fleet to start operating, and that was a year ago. Since then, we have started cruising in the Caribbean and Europe in July and August, but they've almost leapfrogged us in Singapore in terms of how they've advanced their protocols to make it a more normal cruise experience. So I think you mentioned yesterday, will Asia be kind of a laggard in the recovery?
Yes.
And I'm even seeing that in our industry as well.
Will it be?
Well, it depends on how fast. Once we open up, I think we're pretty fast to react. It's just when do we get that signal to be able to move in that direction?
All right. So you have 18 ships now operating out of 26 ships in total, right?
That's right.
So when do you expect full resumption of cruising?
So by the end of Q1, we'll have all our ships operating. We've already announced their deployment. We're taking bookings. We're open for sale. They'll be back in the water by end of Q1.
Right. And so what kind of bookings are you seeing? I mean, are you seeing this sort of what we have seen in revenge travel and people paying presidential suites versus the normal suites?
Well, we have an incredible suite program on Royal Caribbean, and it is the first to sell out during this period. From the minute we'll open new deployment, it'll sell out within 24 to 48 hours. Even if it's a year from now, in Singapore, we know people book very close in, but even a year from now on our new product that we've announced, the suites are almost sold out because people are trying to secure that prime inventory.
Right, and are they mainly from the US or Europe? Because, when I speak to a couple of friends here who are in Asia, they go, oh, I'm scared I might get stuck on a cruise.
No, actually, we are seeing a lot of interest from the US and Europe, but Japan and Korea are already booking further out. And Japan is kind of where all the negative perception around what would happen on a cruise. But really, that is a misperception. Cruise, I think, will rise to be one of the safest holidays you can take in the COVID travel environment, because it's the only industry where everyone on board has been vaccinated and tested, and it's a contained environment, so we can really control and mitigate any kind of spread.
Right, and you've obviously sort of proven it during this 18 months and,
yes.
12 months.
12 months.
12 months in Singapore. Okay. So you've also seen an acceleration of tech on board cruises, right? I mean, you have these bracelets that you wear.
Right.
So are you innovating in that bracelet to make it more IoT, and then, you can target sales?
The bracelet was originally designed to be the one-stop shop for all of your interactions on board. We we rerouted that to be all about contact tracing. And so now we're bringing it back to being kind of the one-stop shopping, controlling things in your room, your door lock and things like that.
Okay, all right. So you've always been very passionate about Asia. You've been here now for
3 years in Singapore,
Right, so
4.5 in Asia.
COVID hasn't changed that perspective of the long-term potential of Asia?
Absolutely not. Asia is the last untapped market for the cruise industry. There's going to be 3 billion middle-class consumers by 2030, yet less than 1% have taken a cruise. And so cruise provides a great kind of all-inclusive value proposition that makes it very easy, especially for groups and families traveling together.
Okay, so Asia is,
Hot.
it's a very new young market. Okay,
Absolutely.
all right. So hot topic right now, you can't run away from is sustainability, right? And cruising does get bad media like aviation, and you got places like Venice now banning cruise ships, for example. So how are you addressing it as a company or as an industry?
Yeah, I think we have a really good story to tell, but we haven't spent a lot of time talking about it. And it starts with perception. So the cruise industry is lumped in with shipping and cargo. All of us in Singapore know cargo because we see it right outside the window. And even to put it in perspective, the shipping industry is 3% of global emissions. Cruise industry is 0.5% of that 3%. So we get a bad reputation. So we are going to start talking about it a bit more, but we're very focused on mitigating that. We've reduced our emissions by 35%. We've signed up for another 25% by 2025. And the industry is working towards zero emission by 2030.
Right, and you do say that you have 100% zero landfill waste. How do you achieve that?
Absolutely. So we reuse, recycle almost everything on board. We have an environmental officer on every ship that's hyper-focused on making improvements. In fact, as a general consumer, you probably produce more waste on land than when you come on board our ship because of our focus on recycling and reusing. I'll give you a great example, a real-life example. Toast. Who has toast for breakfast in the morning? So when you think about the number of toasts that we make across our fleet, if we just make that toast a little less brown, so take it out of the toaster a little sooner, that saves so much energy once you times the number of days, number of consumers, number of ships around the world that we have.
Right.
So we're going down to that level of detail in terms of how can we be more efficient and sustainable on board.
I was interested too in your story about shrimps. So tell us the story of shrimps.
So sustainability doesn't stop with the ship. It also is with our supply chain. So we're working with the Economic Development Board in Singapore to understand how can we make Singapore a hub. Shrimp is a great example. We get our shrimp from Vietnam. We take that shrimp and send it all the way to our global headquarters in the US, where they divide up the shrimp to redistribute it back out to our ships around the world. And so cutting that supply chain in half by simply bringing the Vietnam shrimp to Singapore for the Asia ships seems like a pretty smart move to me.
Right?
Yeah.
Closer to home. Okay, so we had 12 startups competing for 3 spots today. Are you working with startups? And if you had a wish list, what would be the problems you want them to solve for you?
We love startups. We love innovations. We've created things from scratch ourselves to move the cruise industry forward. I really liked the real-time translation via the chat because we are selling globally, yet our platform is very English-centric. So really liked that. And then I think also around food waste consumption, F&B is a big piece of the cruise experience and making sure we can be more efficient in that way.
And what about payments? Because, to crack Asia, it's a multi-currency market. So what about payments?
I was really interested in the buy now, pay later conversation that was taking place throughout this conference. And I think especially in Asia, especially targeting millennials, I think there's an opportunity for us or even our travel partner distributors to offer that as a value proposition.
Okay, well, we have a couple of BNPL startups in the room, so I'll make sure that we introduce you to them. Okay, so you've been with RCCL now for more than 20 years, right? So what did you have to unlearn during this period?
A lot. Probably the most relevant is guest experience, how we design guest experience, because when we started cruising in Singapore, the protocols that we were required to implement went against everything we knew about guest experience. So a perfect example is how we design the ship. Our ships can hold up to 5,000 guests, so we're very focused on queue busting and guest flow. But as you remember in Singapore, when we started, everything was one way in, one way out. Flow had to be very specific. And so we had to cut off a lot of those traffic flow patterns, and And it's not natural from a guest experience point to say, I see the stairs right there to go to the pool, but you're making me walk all the way over there. So thinking that these things would not be possible, but yet we figured out how to make it possible and people are still enjoying themselves.
It's like the events industry where we have to deal with different
Right.
protocols now. Okay, and what's the best purchase that you've made for remote work?
Probably wine, a lot of wine with Zoom calls around the clock, invading your personal life. I think wine has helped me enjoy the work from home aspect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.